All right, welcome to It's 502 Somewhere, a show where we talk to the people that make up the culture and identity of the city of Louisville. I'm your host, Andrew Crum, and I'm really excited for this episode. We are being joined by the program director of WFPK in Louisville, host of Kyle Meredith where he sits down with a bunch of legendary musicians, artists. I mean, Paul McCartney, Sabrina Carpenter, Dolly Parton, I think Jack Black, I saw a little bit of. And then also his work has been seen Rolling Stone, Works with Consequence of Sound. This is Kyle Meredith. Kyle, how are you today?
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
And we'll jump right into it at the gate. If you could tell us a little bit about where you are from and a little bit about your background before getting into the
Sure,
industry.
sure. Originally from Litchfield, Kentucky, right here. About an hour and a half southwest. I born and raised there, but I left in '95. I want to say. I think I was about 13, 14 years old at that point. And eventually moved up to Mount Washington. I graduated from Bullitt East High School. I was really lucky to land at the high school when they did. They sort of had a changeover in the staff, so I came in with this really young staff who hadn't been beaten down by the school system, and they allowed us to launch a television show out
Wow.
of the school, which was sort of like, weekly highlights and that. And I'd been obsessed with media since I was 8 or 9 or something like that. And so that was kind of getting me my first taste. I did my very first interview during that time with a member of Santana,
Oh,
who had local ties. I don't remember what his ties were, but he had local ties. And so he came to the school and I gave him a very horrible interview that he was very nice about. And kind of took it from there. Yeah. I didn't really go to college too much. I did go away to EKU for a moment and I heard they had a cool radio station and I got there and I realized that their radio station you could only hear on TV on campus on a channel that had a black screen,
okay.
and I thought, this is not my dream. This no one's this is I'm going to be doing this for myself and no one else. So I moved back home, got an internship at LRS when it was still around, the alternative station, and that's where I started my radio career.
So getting into radio as you were growing up, you said starting a television show from that early age in high school. And with a lot of your shows revolving around music and you're someone who curates music, was that something you gravitated towards when you were young, music, and did it have that impact right out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of radio people, you'll hear this story, and non-radio people too, but you'll definitely hear it with radio people about the whole thing. Like if you were growing up in the '80s and '90s, how you would just sit at the radio and wait to get the song perfectly, and that's usually what people were doing for mixtapes.
Mm.
I was taking it a step further of then recording myself as the
Oh,
as the DJ, and behind me there's the whole CDs
yeah.
that some of those back there are my first radio shows that I made with my friends, and we would script them all out, and they would be like an hour and a half long, and have commercials and everything that we would write. So I was into it. If you'd asked me what I wanted to be right then, it's not like I would have told you I want to be on the radio. I didn't think
Yeah.
of it like that.
Mm.
Just I knew that that's what I liked to do, and I have a pretty obsessive mind, and so I just kind of stuck with that. I was, every bit of money I ever got, I would go straight out to the record shops and buy a CD, and like I'd spent all of my money on that. And so, yeah, that's what it was. In fact, the very first industry job I had, I was too young. I think I was 16 or 17, and it was in the early days of the internet, and I found about this place called High Frequency where you could be a field marketer, meaning that when bands came to town, they would send you a box of like posters and in-store tapes and CDs, and you would just basically promote that either
You're like
the
you're
album existed or that they were going to be in town.
you're like an ambassador for him. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I it was all over email. I mean, and there's no checks and balances back then, so I said I was 18, and I got the gig. And the first two records that I worked were Elliott Smith's XO and Dave Matthews and Tim Reynolds live at Luther College.
Wow.
So that also gave me an in with the scene here in Louisville. That's when I started, because I was still in high school, but I was getting to know everybody at Ear Ecstasy at that time and all
Yeah.
the shops around town and the venues and everything. So it kind of gave me, I mean, I was the kid who was showing up at venues that I couldn't get into and just waiting at the back door for like 3 or 4 hours to maybe get a glimpse of what that world looked like.
When you were, and in that process, were there any specific maybe records or artists or maybe personalities on the radio at the time that really pulled you in that direction as well?
Yeah, there was a guy out of Owensboro, which was he worked at a top 40 station that we got in Litchfield. Um, his name was Rusty Sharp.
It's a great name.
And lucky for me, because in the 90s when alternative invaded pop,
Mhm.
so we would hear, it was still the popular side of alternative, but you would hear, Everclear next to Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
So I sort of got that, and so his show, I mean, he was like the king of that station. So of course his show I listened to all the time. I never missed an episode of Casey Kasem's weekly top 20 that he would do, which was of course nationally syndicated. And then when I got up here, and LRS again had sort of relaunched as an alternative station in the late 90s, and there was a DJ called Gina Giuliano, who was just, I never met her, but she was just like the coolest person on the radio at that time. So but I think once I got on, I mean, I was definitely emulating people, as a lot of people do, but I think because the timing of when I got on, it was less radio people. Like, I was ripping off Jon Stewart a lot.
Yeah.
He had just taken over the Daily Show, and I'd been a fan of him on MTV before that, so I was kind of ripping on him a whole lot at that point.
So, and what were some of those lessons that you were learning along the journey with a lot of those early experiences?
I mean, it really is just about finding out your voice and who you are. And the dumbest thing that you have to figure out is how to be yourself. That's the dumbest thing. You want to hone your craft while you're doing it. You want to get sharper at whatever voice that is. But whereas, me emulating someone like Jon Stewart, and I used a voice too. I used a voice that was much more, you know, I think I was embarrassed that I was so young, and so I wanted to sound like, like the old DJs from the 70s or something,
Yeah.
the Wolfman Jack or something like that. But it's, so that's the biggest thing you have to learn, is how to come around. It's like to be yourself, but also to be conversational, and try your best at being witty, or whatever that means, just to get there. And it's really dumb how hard that is to realize. But
Yeah.
I was young.
No, yeah. And like, this is a newer show. There was one episode where I tried to do something witty, did not land, but I was just like, gotta keep going. Gotta
Uh-huh.
keep going. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So when did you begin working with WFPK specifically? Public media.
2008.
Okay.
I'd done the radio gig with LRS, and the company got bought out, so there was a reshuffling. I ended up on DJX for a while, and another station called the Max that was around at that time. It just wasn't my world. I got a lot of funny stories from there, but it wasn't my world. And so I started working in record labels for a bit, and just working bands to radio is what I was doing. I was the guy that called up the stations, be like, "Hey, Moby's got a new record coming out. Here's the single." It's and will you play it? So I did that, and I was not made for that job. That's a job of no. Like, you can get 99 no's in a day, but if you get one yes, then you're a success. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, this isn't what I want to do.
Mhm.
And it wasn't creative in the way that I wanted to be creative, but it was a great, I mean, because I was doing that, I met Stacey Owen, who was program director of FPK, and I would
Mhm.
call her every week. And
Oh,
because I was here in town, I got to know her.
okay.
And so I was in Boulder, Colorado, with local musician, Louisville musician, Bridget Kalin. And I remember, God, we were sitting at this restaurant that was right next to the Flatiron Mountains there, and we were talking. I said, I think I got to get back into radio. I don't know how, but I think I got to get back in. And she said, well, I'm pretty sure that Matt Anthony, who's still on FBK, but at that point he was the weekly night host.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure, she said, I'm pretty sure he's not going to do that anymore, and he's only going to do Soundclash. So I think they're going to look for a night host.
Oh.
So I immediately called Stacy up and said, hey, I hear you need a night host. She said, well, too late. I already got one.
Ah,
But why don't you come in and we'll talk about you being a fill-in? And so that's why I started. I was a fill-in, and I immediately pitched her a show, a weekly show that I called the Weekly Feed. And that's how I started. My official first, I think, day I was on the air, like not training, was like Christmas Eve,
Okay.
2008. So I've been there 16 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's a long, I mean, and I feel like you've been able to make it into your own with what you've done there right now. So when you, as you know, a host, as a nightly host, when you are curating playlists, is there a specific process you keep in mind, or is it more of a gut feeling depending on feelings or the vibe in a particular day or week, or is it like, oh, I got to get this new artist out there a little bit? Like, what's your process with that?
It's really, I mean, first it's about the audience, and that's tricky with us. And I say that even more than like most commercial stations, only because their lane is already painted, right?
Yeah,
Like if you are a rock station, you are going to be playing Alice in Chains that night or whatever it is, and if you are DJ X, you kind of know what the playlist will be. Even, just with something like us, what type of music does FPK play? All of it?
yeah. This it's a little bit of all.
Just everything? So we have to think of the audience. We have a demo. Every station has a demo, which is not to say that's the only people that listen to the station. I think our demo is like 35 to 54. And of course we have tons of listeners that are older than 54, and we have tons of listeners that are younger than 35. But as the target demo, you have to have that to sort of what you're saying, to be able to have a direction,
Yeah,
to and so that's, I start with that. I mean, we know the types more or less, even with all the genres, we kind of know the type of sound that people expect from us.
mhm,
And there is, to a degree, you have to deliver that first, the expectation, because that's why they're tuning in for you. They bought into you,
yeah,
they trust you
mhm,
that you're going to give them something that they like, which means the foundation of that has to be something that they already like. Doesn't mean it have to be something that they've ever heard, just
mhm,
has to sort of fit that bill. And then because a lot of our listeners are adventurous listeners, that means we get to go really deep, or we get to, start painting outside of the lines as far as music from other countries and languages and everything like that. It definitely means we can introduce more new music than a lot of other stations like us might be able to get away with. We have listeners that they want to know who the next Tyler Childers is going to be.
yeah,
They want to know just whatever, that example is going to be. And then we make sure to super serve Louisville music as well.
yeah,
What we call our 50 tunes, to make sure that those are represented, if not every hour, then most hours, throughout the day. So, and whatever's left, there's usually a couple tracks left. I'm like, yeah, that's for me.
yeah. I'll throw in one for the, one for thee, one
Yeah,
for me. We'll get a little
yeah.
bit in there.
Because I mean, this is the job, right? They hear me at the office say this all the time. Like, I work in the toy department.
Yeah.
This is fun. Like, this is the fun thing. So yeah, I want to play with the toys too.
So, in addition to this, you also host an interview-based show called "It's Kyle Meredith with,"
Mhm.
where you have been able to have in-depth conversation with some of the biggest names in music. Like I said in the beginning, what has been an interview that's really stuck with you? Maybe it's one that you have been wanting to do for years, or it's
Mhm.
one that really surprised you in the moment. What would that be for you?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like that. It's like I'm glad you didn't say what's your favorite interview, because
Yeah,
it's like I've done over 2,500 interviews.
yeah,
I don't know, man. They're good or they're not, or they're forgettable,
yeah.
And if you're lucky, they're great. And they're definitely the ones, the heroes, right? Just those massive names that I mean, Paul McCartney. When Paul McCartney, he's in a limo in Louisville on the way to the Yum Center, and I could hear him tell, I'm guessing his manager, tour manager, whoever, who was saying like, "Oh yeah, no, you've done your 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it was." He's like, "No, let's keep going."
That's awesome.
And then he says, "All right, Kyle, what do you got?" And I'm like, Paul McCartney just said my name. There are those moments along the way. Robert Plant, U2, at Pearl Jam. I mean, I was a Pearl Jam fanatic growing up in my teen years, and now they're my friends. So having them on, like I have different guys on every year usually. So those moments are in there, and then making friends with Saint Vincent and Cheryl Crow and Shirley Manson and Liz Phair, and those are also people. It's like, oh, I'm short a guest. I'm going to call Liz Phair. Hang on, I can do that. Like, that's,
That's
I don't take it for granted. That blows my mind. I say that If it sounds like humble bragging, it's full on bragging. It's like,
Oh,
I
oh,
got
I would 1,000% just be like, yeah, I got it on speed dial. One of
right,
it.
right. Like that's still me talking to my teenage self. The interview that I think internally, and so like externally the plant and all that stuff that made viral headlines and everything, for stuff that they said. Like I've had the luxury of that a bunch of times, but for me the turning point was Eric Andre.
Oh,
Yeah, up until that point, and this would have been 2020 or 2020 2021, something around there. I have to go back and look. Up until that point, I was really predominantly doing just musicians. I had started going outside the FPK world of indie rock, like, because I was like, I want to have different conversations. You start to feel like maybe you're asking the same questions over and over, even if the
mhm.
conversation's good, even if it doesn't sound like Q&A. It's like we're sort of talking about the same things a lot,
Yeah.
especially the volume that I was doing them at. And so I started saying yes to like the Pope's choir director, or some B grade hair bands from the 80s, or just whatever I could get a different conversation out of.
Mhm.
And then I started finding some fun with actors that are musicians.
Mm.
Might have been David Duchovny. If he wasn't the first one, he was one of the first ones. And I was like, oh, that's fun because in this conversation I could probably ask him, about the X-Files or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, you can
whatever
really
it
sneak
was.
it in there.
Yeah, like I could find a way to make it musical,
Make it,
but
yeah.
I get to do that. And so a friend of mine who had worked at a record label had switched over and had started working for Netflix as a publicist. And he just reached out to me one day and he goes, "What do you think about interviewing Eric Andre? He doesn't have an album, he's got a movie coming out." I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." I didn't even know if Consequence would be cool with it, and I was like, "All right, let's do this."
Did you know much about Eric Andre before that,
I
or
mean,
were
I
you
watched his
pretty
show, The Eric Andre Show,
okay?
the prank show and smashing through his desk every episode. That's what I knew about him. Um, I knew it fit my audience, but also I didn't even care if it fit my audience. It was like,
Yeah.
this is just different. I was actually torching my analytics to the chagrin of my editors because I was just doing stuff that my audience that had signed up didn't exactly sign up for.
Look,
It
you
was kind of like
should.
all right, I was because I had it, was under contract to do 3 episodes a week. And so I sort of started doing this things like, I'll give you 2 and I'm going to do one for me. And I think the Eric Andre was the one for me. But ended up being a really fun conversation. But what that did is that opened the door at Netflix.
Oh, okay.
And so I started really just kind of nudging and pushing my way in a little bit to just to figure out like, well, who else? Who's the other publicist? What are they doing? I'll just blind email them. What do you have coming up? And it took a while, to gain their trust and everything. And they would just kind of throw me some scraps, and I would gladly take them and and just do what I needed to with those conversations. And I just built that up and built that up and built that up. So that Eric Andre interview is really the big turning point in my series that went from just being a music to being music, film, and television, which now is probably a half and half type of a thing.
And when you're in not just musicians but in actors, do you find there's any difference in your approach in talking with those more established artists or actors or artists? I said artist twice, I think, or emerging musicians in the industry. If there's an artist you've known long enough and have spent time with their music, also how are you able to kind of like separate that side of it when
Yeah.
you're interviewing them?
I don't think there's a difference. I mean, there's a I mean, obviously if I'm researching an album versus researching a show, just the entry point's going to be different. For a show, it's, I'll set and turn on the show and with my laptop there, and it's 10 hours, right? 10 episodes, hour a piece, sometimes, usually. And like my process is, as soon as a thought comes to my mind that might be a question, it's worth writing down. Every
Mhm.
thought is worth writing down, because if it made whatever's happening in front of me, if it made me think something, then that's a question. And I always say, like, first rule, every question has to have a question mark. So I'll figure that out later, but my first draft is just thoughts. It's just thoughts. Like, oh yeah, they're talking a lot about whatever that is, on that show. And for an album, it's the same thing. It's like, I don't read the press release first, which is nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got their process. But what I do is I just put the earbuds in and I listen to it 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times. and I just kind of write down everything that I think about. And then I'll go back to the press release, and some of that stuff might be answered.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's still worth asking, because the best thing you can do is ask a follow-up question. The best question's a follow-up question. That's the part of it. And then when it comes to the person, there really is no difference between, like, this is not one of those like, meh. I get the same anxiety from somebody that I've had on my show a dozen times, to some megastar, to someone who's just getting their start and is an unknown. I don't want to waste their time. It's that Midwest meets South thing that we got. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
waste their time. So I get in my head about that. But once the camera's on, it's all out the window. That's the trust fall. I have my notes right there on the screen, and we just go. Like, I've had really dumb, nervous moments in person, having dinner with Michael Stipe, or standing next to Bono or whatever, where I could not, nothing came out of my mouth. Didn't matter. Put the gun in my head. I don't know what to say. I don't, nothing. But those same people, when we're like this and it's interview time, it's just like me and you talking right now.
Yeah. And building on that a little bit, if as someone who, I'm very new to interviewing, I mean, I've done it for a few years with my work, and now I'm doing it with the state of Louisville. What's advice you would give to someone who is getting into interviewing that you wish that you had received when you were getting started?
It really is about the research. Like, the Shins have a song called Know Your Onion, and I use that phrase a lot. You got to know your onion. Don't go in, don't waste their time. I mean, 3 rules, and I've already said them all. Don't waste anybody's time. Make sure your question has a question mark, and the best question you can ask is a follow-up question. You know, that second one, make sure it has a question mark. If you give a yes or no question, they can give you a yes or no answer,
Yes, I've
and you
learned that.
cannot take that anywhere. You can push again, you can say go on, or whatever, but that's your fault. That's, so, it's not have you ever done this, it's how did you do that?
Hmm.
And then you listen to them. And Laura Shine, at WFPK, our afternoon host, she's the one who taught me that. It's like, you listen to what they're saying, and then you say why,
Hmm.
or whatever that is,
Yeah.
whatever version of why that is. And usually what they say next was 10 times more in depth, and a better answer than the first part of that.
No, that's really, and I think that's insightful for me specifically learning about it, but also I think anybody listening that's getting into journalism, getting into interviewing, etc. And as someone who's working with Louisville Public Media, we have seen the cuts that have been made. And before I reached out, I think that was the day when that was announced. And then I know that you guys have been raising money. It's not all the way. There's a lot of work along the way to get that fully raised. But what does that support from the community mean to you all?
I mean, we are a community run station, community owned station. I mean, we don't exist without the community's buy-in. That's it. As we say during pledge drives, the difference between us and a commercial station is they're going to be here tomorrow as long as businesses are paying for it. They get to be on the air whether anyone's listening to them or not. If the ratings are bad, it doesn't matter. As long as the business is paying for it. If we're doing a bad job, people will not give us money, and then we're gone. So that's everything. And I mean, we are beholden to our listeners, to the community of Louisville. And as someone who's worked in several different parts of the industry, as someone who's in close contact with a lot of my friends who also run other radio stations around the country, I mean, we do have something extremely special here. What happened to us on the day that the federal funds were rescinded did not happen to every station. I think there are a lot of stations around the country that are very angry at what the president is currently doing, and the White House is currently doing, and Congress is currently doing, and so public radio is getting a great burst of support right now, and thankfully, because that's what it is. With the day that it was rescinded, uh, that's 5% of our budget. Us. Some stations that's 30%. Some stations that's 50%. They go off the air
Yeah.
immediately, more or less, if they can't find that money.
Mhm.
With us, we don't go off the air immediately, but it definitely hinders what we can do. That amount of money we had to make up is about the same amount of money it takes to produce Waterfront Wednesday
Mm.
every season, as one example. So when that was taken away, it's a big deal. So the fact that we could go on the air that day and say to our listeners, like, which we had been planning for months.
Mhm.
And we had been trying to keep our listeners educated the entire time to let them know what's going on in Congress, because it was very confusing.
Yeah.
Because you heard about it like 6 months first that Trump was going to do it. And for some people, they thought that means he already did it.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, 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 no. It has to go through this judicial process.
Mhm.
You know, it's when we go back to the "I'm Just a Bill" song from Schoolhouse Rock. You know, that's, learning all about that. So there's this step, and there's this step, and there's this step. And we decided to put a promo on the air that aired every day that kind of worked our audience through that let them know where we were in the process. That's not sexy radio,
Yeah.
but I think that was one of the reasons that by the time it finally did come down to it, they understood this wasn't us asking the fifth time or something like that. This is us asking the first time.
Yeah.
Now it's happened. And for our listeners to come through for us and then some. I mean, it was a $376,000 deficit. It was over $400,000 were raised in 30 hours, with some more money that trickled in, of course, throughout the rest of that weekend.
Yeah.
And yeah, so again, I was only playing around with something you said a second ago with, like, that's not our full. We didn't reach the full thing. We'll never reach the full thing
Yeah.
because there's always bills to be paid every year.
Yes. Yes.
We never get to it like, all right, well, we got all the money we
Yeah.
need.
That's the nonprofit world.
It's the nonprofit world, right? So that does mean that, and when September comes and our fall drive, we'll go back out there and and whatever the message is, that's what we'll appeal to. And if we've done a good job as a radio station that you want to listen to, for some people, that's going to be that they say, yes, I understand that, why I understand why this is important to me, and I understand why it's important to the community that I'm a part of.
And something you had mentioned in that answer, you talked about how there's something that's special in the scene in Louisville and kind of the city in Louisville in general. So, what do you think sets the city of Louisville and also just the community in general apart from other areas across the country?
Yeah. What is that? What is the magic of Louisville? Louisville's never been a Seattle, right? Or a San Francisco or a New York. Close a few times where it's like we had all the buzz that almost happened or whatever.
Mhm.
There's never been the complete corporate takeover, although we have lots of great corporations here in town. I think that's sort of allowed our art scene to not exist in a vacuum, but sort of exist without the outside poking in all the time.
Mhm.
Back before the monoculture that we live in now existed, when every city had its own personality. Ours was another city that had its own personality. And now you have a lot less of that, but yet Louisville seems to still have a weird little personality. And it is that weird little, gateway to the South, not exactly the Midwest, but are we? And
Yeah, we're in the middle.
and if you ask someone in Florida, we're pretty north, but because the state above us touches Canada, so it's it's like, where are we? It's Southeast region, SEC. I don't know, man. Louisville has always had an identity problem, and maybe that's the magic. Maybe that's why we exist the way we do.
We're not locked down to anything
We're
specific.
not,
It's ever changing, I feel like.
but I think we're lucky too. I mean,
Mhm.
when you get past, the t-shirt slogans or whatever, every now and then, you may have had this, every now and then you'll get a friend group at a point in your life where it's like the perfect situation for all of you, for
Mhm.
that friend group. And that maybe that's what Louisville is. Because again, I say, I've got great friends who run stations in Kansas City. I'm thinking outside of the big metro, the major, top
Mhm.
fives or whatever,
Yeah.
or Austin or whatever. And they don't have the listenership that we have in the same way, and they're a mid-sized market, and they do a good job with their station. And so that's not it. I don't know what is. I think we just got lucky. We're the city that people love to move away from and then move back to, or if they wouldn't start from here, they move to here thinking that they're going to springboard out, and then they just don't ever leave,
Oh.
So there's got to be a reason for that.
Absolutely. And I just gonna say, I love the friend group analogy. I'm gonna use that for something. I don't know what, but I'm gonna use it for something. That's a
How about it?
great and Louisville, Kentucky as well. So we're gonna have a little bit of a rapid fire segment at the end right here, and then I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Kyle, again for joining the show. First question, it's called Crumb's Corner, the rapid fire round. Who is a dream guest for you to have on Kyle Meredith with?
Still love to get Trent Reznor.
Mm.
There's a lot to talk about with Trent.
Yeah, and with like his scores and
That's what I'm
films,
saying.
like
There's a
that's
lot
the
to
yeah.
talk about with Trent. Yeah.
So what's
And then I guess it'd be on the movie side too, right? I've
mm,
been chasing Ewan McGregor for a long time. I'm still hoping to
yeah,
get that one soon.
yeah, that would be great. I mean, not just Star Wars, but all the other stuff he's
All of
been
it.
in.
Yeah.
What is your favorite place to see live music in Louisville?
Oh man, favorite place. It's hard because I can tell you something great about just about every venue in this town.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you go, to the theaters, like the Palace or the Kentucky Center or Paris Town like that, like these great moments. I mean, geez, the Palace, that's one of those things people ask me about from other cities, At the same time, I cut my teeth in headliners. I had my wedding after party at headliners,
Mm.
so it's like, so I've really grown up there. I mean, I think one of the first shows I ever saw in Louisville after moving here was at Headliners. So I've been there through almost its entire run as a venue. And then, you have the Whirling Tiger, which is, what that team has done with that room, because that room's been a lot of rooms over the years, and
Mhm.
for just different reasons it's never taken. And the fact that they've made it into this, not just beautiful, but the scene that they've cultivated out of that, when you talk about community, I don't mean to dodge the answer with a lot
Oh
of
no.
answers, but that's, there's a lot of great rooms here in
Oh
town.
yeah, there's a lot of places that have different aspects to offer, and I also do love Boiling Tiger. I think it's fantastic. All right, so this is another one similar to that. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be the definitive four, but maybe the four that come to your mind right now. So let's say you have to put together four headliners for a concert on the waterfront in Louisville. It could just be a Waterfront Wednesday esque show, or just a Waterfront Wednesday. Dead or alive, who would you be choosing for your top ideal music festival?
Jeez, dead or alive, do we have to be able to afford them?
No, money is not a money's not a
Yeah.
problem here.
You're talking like the dream concert of all time.
Yeah.
Like, most of the time, if you like some of the other set that I have, although they're gotta be back here. Yeah, Bowie's back here. I always keep Bowie over my shoulder in both of them. So Bowie's my North Star and Prince. So you'd have Bowie and Prince. If I could throw in REM, mostly because they've made it impossible to see them now, as they're technically not a band. What for fun on that fourth one? Garbage. I'd love to put Garbage there too. Yeah, just so it's an alternative show.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, why
It's
not?
collect. I'm there. I'm buying a
That's my
ticket.
answer today anyway.
What is a new favorite album of yours in 2025?
Maybe because I mentioned him a minute ago. I mean, right now, because the Tyler Childers just came out, and
Yes.
I drove down to Nashville on Monday and I watched him do a surprise pop-up show in a yard. And just, it was incredible. And that new record is so good. Um, some people that's dogging it. I was A
Yeah,
friend of mine.
I didn't get that at all. I thought it was his best since
Yeah,
Country Squire, at least for me. But
it's so good. It's so good. The Biting List.
oh, that's a
That's
perfect song. I love
That's
that
what
song.
everybody's talking about, that song, and him doing that live and growling and howling at the end, was everything. No, I love the Tyler Childers record. It's probably, at least this week, that's my favorite one that I'm listening to right now.
Yeah, I saw that he was performing also in like Dino World in the middle of
Yeah, he did the
Kentucky.
he did the
I
Dino World the
saw
day
that.
after,
I
right.
was like, man, that's an awesome
Yeah,
like little mini tour in the middle
yeah.
of Kentucky. That's incredible. And then one final question. This could also be a couple of places too. If someone was in Louisville for the first time, what would be some of those first places that you would tell them to go by? This could be your favorite spots. It could be a restaurant. It could be a record store. It could be
Yeah.
a park, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you've gotta visit the record stores, Guest Room, Mad Anthony's, Better Days, all great records. Also, Great Escape and Half Price. I visit them all, most weeks. My money still goes to buying CDs. Yeah, because when my friends come to town, I already assume that they're going to do the tourist things.
Yeah.
Like, I assume that's whatever version of that, if it's the Track or the Bat Factory or whatever. So a lot of the time, it's like, let's go to the Merriweather, or Yahtzee, one of those places. Or I love seeing the bats in both soccer teams. So I'd probably take them to one of those, just because they're not. I mean, the soccer is professional, but the bats, because it's minor league, so it's not something they usually get. something around there, and yeah, yeah, it's good.
I think that's a good list, and I think that's a good place to
Think
end
so.
it. Thanks so much again, Kyle, for joining the show. Really interesting getting to learn about your background, how you got into the industry, and interviewing so many large guests and being able to grow at your craft is something that I admire as somebody that is getting into interviewing. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much again. And just remember, everybody, it's 502 somewhere. Check you next time, guys.